Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Reddit Roasts. John, I believe we're on roast 20. Nice little milestone there. Lovely to see you again.
Nice to see you again, Sam, and happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Let's get stuck into the roasts. Today we have quite a hardcore focus on profile evaluations. It's July. People are really knuckling down and deciding which schools to apply to and starting their applications for the September deadlines for round one. We've got quite a lot of boutique and big four consultants today, John. We've also got engineers as usual and investment bankers. So a broad spread of kind of professional profiles. We've also got an interesting question. Somebody asking, how do you get back to the real world after an MBA? Because there's a bit of a mental transition there that I certainly felt. So we'll talk a bit about that as well. So John, profile number one, we've titled it Country Lover. Competitive for McCombs MBA question mark. Okay, so the profile goes like this. Took the GRE yesterday, got a 157Q, 157V, 154Q. I know the quant's not ideal, but it is within the middle 80% range for McCombs, which is the following. Okay. Quick snapshot of the profile. Undergrad GPA from University of Rochester was a 3.58. Master's GPA, 3.74. 4 years of work experience as a data scientist at PwC, so a big four consultancy. Extras, promoted from data scientist to senior data scientist, built a product portfolio and aiming to transition to product management after business school. In terms of demographics, I was born in Syracuse, New York, targeting McCombs because my partner and I are planning to build a life in Austin after graduation. So quite a nice school fit there. I built several personal projects inspired by that. For example, involved in using natural language processing to explore trends in country music lyrics. Random, but really, really nice extracurricular and narrative there. Would love some insight. Is this GRE score enough given the rest of my profile? Or should I waive the exam, which is an option that is on the table if I cannot improve the quant score? So I'm going to upvote that. John, over to you. How do you see this profile?
Well, Sam, I think it's a pretty likable profile with a few caveats that OP has flagged.
Okay.
That is the GRE. Look, diving into the academics, that quantitative score is a little bit of an offender. The GPA is okay as long as there's no red flag with any of the quant-related classes. I'm talking like C's or equivalent. Grad school GPA is pretty good, but schools don't care as much about your grad school GPA.
Right.
Professionally, I like the data scientist angle. It's becoming a little bit more in vogue. It's coming into more vogue versus, your usual crop of assurance folks from the big four. I would love to see OP push for the AI angle. Equivalently, I love OP's foray into country music. I had a former client of ours who worked at a large media agency and performed and organized country band music concerts around the US. And that angle worked well for that person. Demographically, not much other than origin, growing from Syracuse. I like this profile overall, Sam. That GRE is a bit of a stinker, but over to you.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's going to come down to narrative on this one. Like GPA is bang on the average, right? Let's say that the GRE comes in around sort of the average of McCombs. I think it's going to come down to whether OP can create an interesting narrative, and I do think the ingredients are there. As you say, this country music theme could really, really work. And I particularly if this, imagine this, John, imagine that this fed into a professional goal, right? So if the goal is product management, I wonder if there's a product management role that sort of links to music somehow, or even like uses AI in the music domain somehow. Like there could be a really nice and tidy narrative that would stand out. OP could start the story with this experience of using country music, like analyzing country music, realizing that I want to use my data scientist background, my professional experience, and apply it to this industry and this area that I really, really enjoy and care about. And so after the MBA, I want to be a product manager at this particular niche company that's analyzing music or something AI and music related, and then move from there. I think that's the sort of story that the school would really oh, that's interesting, that's different, and really distinguish OP from the billions of other PwC, Big Four, applicants who are
Mm-hmm.
applying to business school. And I think with that approach, I think McComb's application is credible.
Yep, I
Yeah.
agree too. I love that narrative, Sam. Look, I mean, something along the lines of, let's say, you know, out of all the genres, country music attracts, you know, the highest percentage of independent artists. You know, independent artists struggle to find a platform to publish their music. I want to develop a nifty solution to level the playing field, or help empower these independent
Love
artists.
it.
Something like that.
I
Yeah.
love it. That's really, really nice. And then I mean, there's obviously a bit of a sort of a cliche between the sort of Texas and country music, etc. But that doesn't have to be made like, it doesn't have to be cheesy. One idea that I had was mention this idea of like, why Austin, Texas? Because I'm planning on building a life there with my partner after graduation. Like, I think schools will appreciate you telling them that. Now, whether it comes into the core career narrative, for example, choosing PM roles that are based in Austin, like that could be part of it. But I also think OP should include an optional essay about this, and just be upfront and be like, look, I understand that to be going from Syracuse to Austin, like that would be a big move, but here's how it fits into my life plans. My partner is working at XYZ company in Austin, or my partner is from there, or like whatever the reason is, explain that. Be upfront about that. It's not that you're going to get in because of this, right? All the professional stuff matters as well, but they will appreciate the personal angle, and they will understand. It'll kind of remove one of the question marks that they have when they look at your profile and think, hang on, why on earth is this person applying to us? It will alleviate that question mark, and I think will be really helpful. If there's a way of playing that, linking that to the music theme, great, but it's not essential. Okay. There's also an element here, John. I made a note of this, which is around demographics. We don't know what OP's demographic is. Do you think that affects the target score and the sort of the GRE plans?
It might, but I don't think it's going to. It's not a matter of, you know. I think it will. I don't think it's going to matter all that much. I think a few percent. I think it might give OP a few percentage, a few points leeway. But OP is going to have to get that GRE up to at least a 320 plus.
You think a 320 is the area, and if I think there's a waive the exam. He's saying there's an option to waive the exam for McCombs this year. Do you think what's the cutoff below which OP's better off waiving than submitting the test? What score is the cutoff point?
I think if it starts with a 3.2 something, that's okay. Anything below that, I think OP should consider a waiver.
Okay, I think that's a bit aggressive. I would say my number would be like 318 or around that point.
Okay,
I think schools would still. I think schools would still appreciate that you've made the efforts. You've alleviated any worries that it's a train wreck on the quant side. It might not be great, but it's not a train wreck. And I think you give them a little bit more information if you do give them a score, even if it is a little bit below the average. But yeah, we're in the same ballpark. Okay, excellent. I think let's move on from there. Hopefully that was been of some added value. I think the summary, OP, is that yes, apply. If you can get that GRE score up into the 318, 319, 320 level, I think probably worth submitting the score. Okay, great. John, next profile. Another profile evaluation being requested. Is my list realistic for 2027 intake? So year after, we're in 26 intake now. So we're talking about a next year application. I'm an Indian citizen, but I've been in the US since the beginning of undergrad and currently on an H-1B. Target school list is pretty aggressive. Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, the rest of the M7, and then Yale and Johnson. Profile as follows. Finance at Southern University. 3.9 GPA, attended on a full merit scholarship, pretty punchy. Masters with a 4.0 GPA. Previous work experience, internship in 2 years at a top 10 investment bank focused on M&A in the US. Top ranked in my class. Didn't get the H-1B visa after my first year, so bank paid for me to go to the Masters in Business Analytics before coming back. Led training for interns. Current work experience, starting as an associate at a well-known private equity firm. 110 billion US in assets. So that's one of the bigger ones. And plan to spend spend 2 years here before going to B school. Interesting. Ultimately, we'll have 2 years of top IB and 2 years of PE experience before B school. Post MBA plans will be to return to PE to advance my career there. Leadership: serve on a senior board of the IB program at my uni. Okay, and I think that currently serve on the senior board. So that's recent, that's relevant. And then also serve it as a key point for recruiting for my bank. Haven't taken the GMAT yet, but I'm a good test taker and I have plenty of time. Secondary question: will I be competitive? Will I be competitive given I'll be in the same pool as the IIT, IIM background of Indian males who will be applying with killer GPAs and GMATs? Interesting. So, John, high level, how do you see this profile?
There are merits to this profile. I quite like it, but I feel OP needs a little bit more of a special sauce for some of those aggressive schools on that list. But diving in, academically, I think OP is pretty strong. OP is going to need a high GRE or GMAT. I would say, you know, high 320s or 695 plus, given OP's demographic.
Yeah.
Professionally, I think what OP does now is very meaningful. Look, I mean, the fact that the bank paid for OP's master's program, that the bank's able to sponsor their MBA, both, you know, delivering assurance in terms of the visa and the professional role secured post MBA would really help sell a lot of confidence.
Jump in. I think it's the PE firm. The current role is the PE firm now, but same thing.
Okay.
If they could sponsor the
they could sponsor,
return, it would be very positive. Okay.
Obviously, sponsorship is more common in consulting, so to be able to display sponsorship would you know, it would mean volumes. Both, you know, substantiating his performance, etc. Demographically, look, ORM, I would probably see the ORM not necessarily against those who graduated from IIM and IIT as OP had, you know, thought, but it's still going to be among, you know, international Indians who South Asians in the US, or those who are you know, who are Indian origin but went to a US college and are currently working in the US as OP is. So either way, it's still going to be tough. Over to you, Sam.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, definitely a strong background. Just objectively a strong background. I like the investment banking experience, and that they've obviously, the bank vouched for OP, and the PE experience will be nice as well. And the goal of returning to PE, particularly if sponsored, you know, you expect a decent post MBA salary, which is obviously good for the school's stats. So that's a big strength as well. But I think you hit the nail on the head there with the special sauce. I think you're going to need something as an IBP applicant applying to M7 and HSW. You're going to need something special to stand out, OP. And I'm not seeing at the moment, sure, it's only a one-page profile, but at the moment, I'm not seeing what that special sauce is. To give you an idea, like just very kind of off the top of the head, I worked with a client a couple of years ago in a similar sort of position, investment banking client, had all the strong stats, got into Harvard. Now, to be IB and get into Harvard, you've got to have something special. And he writes an essay, or he tells in his application about helping to install wheelchair ramps in a nightclub so that his disabled friend could come raving with him. Now, that is an incredibly punchy story, and just completely differentiates a banker from other you know, candidates. And I think that it's something like that that's going to be needed to be the cherry on this cake that's going to get into HSW. Without it, I think M7 is credible. But I think the difference between M7 and HSW for OP is going to be something unique, something special. And honestly, that's where an MBA admissions consultant comes in, is like finding that cherry. I think that's how I see this. And to the point about the kind of what might be special, I imagine OP's answer is, hey, look, I'm on this board of the IB program, my uni, and mentored countless students to get into IB. I'm afraid mentoring students into IB is just not going to cut it on its own, right? To be really, really clear, that is something that is just not, the stakes are not that high in a way. You're not really leading at scale. It's one-on-one leadership. It is, you're not getting paid for this. It's not that impactful, and it's very, very common. And if it's not you helping people get into IB, it's the person who's applying next to you who's helping people get into undergrad. It's teaching math to poor kids. There's so many people writing this particular story that is not special sauce. So
yeah,
wanted to get that sort of clear. John, where does the GRE GMAT need to be for M7?
Well, I 695 minimum, but ideally in the low 700s for OP's demographic. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm aligned. I think the threshold in my mind here, which is where the data is the old, where 80% of the test takers historically, and up until recently, like most of the school applications were the old GMAT. That's where we have the data. The hardcore, the number for HSW that you needed to be above as an overrepresented applicant was always 730 back in the day, which is the Harvard an M7 average. That translates to about a 330 GRE, which is where ICOP needing to be. And on the new test, it's about a 695 thereabouts.
Yeah.
I agree, but that's like par for the course. If you really want to stand out, I think higher would be right, would be good. I think that this OP's aiming for 95th, 99th percentile. It looks like OP's on the right track, or at least expectations are right. I would also say I'm aligned with you on this kind of comparison thing. I think we see so many Indian males on H1Bs in the US. I think actually that's the pool. That's the comparison pool that OP is going to be really thrown in against. Yeah, some of them will be IIT, some of them will whatever, but really it's the H1B Indians in America. There's such a big group of them that's the competitive pool, I think. Anything I've missed?
Nope, that makes sense. I did latch on to something you said earlier, Tim, about finding your cherry. I think that should be a new t-shirt slogan for us. Find your cherry.
Sure, Find your cherry here on the front of the t-shirt with a little SWC logo. I don't know. It'd be nice. We'll do a roast in those t-shirts one day. All right, John, let's move on to the next profile. Okay, so 321 GRE. So OP has taken the test. 3.5 from top LAC. Round one target schools wait for R2. Okay, long time lurker, first time poster. Hello, welcome. Took the GRE for the first time and scored a 321. And this has prompted OP to go from lurker to poster and to get a profile evaluation. This was slightly lower than my practice tests. That's not uncommon. We'll talk about it. But I'm not a quanty person by any stretch. Planning to take the test again in a few weeks, but haven't got that much time to improve. 3.5 GPA from a top liberal arts college, 2 years at a boutique strategy consulting firm, 2 years at a top strategy group. Want to get perspectives on what schools would be targets for me currently, so with a 321, if I don't improve on the retake. Also want to get advice on waiting for R2 and applying with a higher score versus applying with the score I have now. Wharton and Kellogg are dream schools. Columbia, Haas, Stern are top, semi-realistic. Fuqua, Darden, Ross seem like most realistic targets. All right, John, quite a short post there, but I think enough to go on. How do you see this profile?
Certainly, Sam. Look, I think it's strong in places. There are a couple of pink flags that OP has already addressed, so we're not addressing anything radically new here. But diving into OP's profile, I will be careful with that profile because a 3.5-ish from a liberal arts college, in some cases, liberal arts colleges have great inflation, and schools know this, and so a 3.5 may be equivalent to a 3.4. Compared to other national universities. That 321 is not going to help, but that's a first take. OP, I think there's potential to improve, and I no doubt feel that you will improve that by a couple percentage points. I would prioritize getting that font score a little higher, of course. Professionally, no, pretty good standard mix of strategy consulting and a little bit of finance. I would love to dig more into your direct impact with the CEO and COO. Sounds like you're a chief of staff in training. What kind of impactful things have you done that caught the attention of these leaders, and how has that improved the firm? That's going to be really, really great fodder for your resume and your B-school essays. Demographically, not much specified there, Sam, so I don't know much to go off on. But overall, I like this profile. Strong potential. Definitely room for improvement in the test taking department.
Interesting. I'm aligned. Aligned. I think there's a big chasm appearing here between applying with a 321 versus retaking and applying with a higher score, because there is potential for a strong application here. But with a 321, I think you could forget about the Whartons and the Columbias of the world, to be really direct. I think so. Oh, and that's okay, because look, OP, most people score like underwhelmingly on their first test. It's such a common, we hear it all the time. I meet somebody who's pre-GMAT and they say, right, I'm or GRE, and I'm taking the test, and I'm in my practice tests, I'm scoring a 330 and everything's looking hunky-dory. And then they score the test and I get an email, they take the test and I get an email the next day saying it didn't go as well as I'd hoped. And it's so common. And the reason, the reasons are multiple. The reasons are, in the real test, you're under different pressure. You're in a different environment. You're taking a test that you definitely haven't taken before, and whereas sometimes your practice tests, you may have seen some of the questions before back in the day. There's lots of factors here, but for whatever reason it is, lots of people end up with a lower test the first time they take it than they were expecting. Just retake it. There's no downside in B-school applications to retaking the test. I learned the other day, John, that in law school applications, if you take the equivalent of the GMAT, GRE in the law world, every time you take the test, your average gets adjusted for the new test. And therefore, if you do badly in the next test, you could actually reduce your average, and that can hurt you. It's not like that in MBA world. Every time you take the test, if you get it higher, great, you can use that higher score. If you don't, forget about it. So there's no detriment to taking the test again. And I think OP, that really needs to be plan A. Get back, hit the books again, get back in the test center, take that test one more time. Because if you get that score into the high 320s, 328s, 329s, that kind of ballpark, I do think these target schools could be on the cusp, could be realistic. But I strongly believe you are not going to get into Wharton from a boutique strategy consulting firm with a 321. I think that's pretty concrete. So with the current GRE, let's imagine worst case scenario, John, OP does not get that score higher. Which schools do you deem to be semi-realistic, as he puts it, or she puts it?
I think Fuqua, Darden, and Ross are worthy schools to apply to, but OP should aim for something in the T15, possibly even T20 mark. And I'm looking specifically at Cornell. I'm looking at Emory. I'm looking at UNC. Schools in those range would look favorably upon OP's application. Obviously, we hope OP can improve that GRE score to a mid 320s or high 320s, but that will be my recommendation, Sam. Yeah,
the two that jumped to mind, honestly, were Cornell and UNC Keenan Flagler. Those are the two for me that I initially thought. I think Fuqua will be a stretch. I think Darden and Ross potentially with the current score might be doable. And then I guess the other question is, imagine OP does get that 330. Is M7 on the cards?
I think it is. I think it's not going to be easy, but OP should not avoid applying to M7 with a 330. I think I think with that profile, M7 is definitely fair game.
Yeah. In round, probably going to be in round one, you think?
Well, at this point, if OP's only just started taking the GRE, OP's going to need a miracle to be able to submit the score that and in time. So I think round two may be more realistic, Sam.
Yeah, I'm aligned on that. That's what I was thinking. I think OP, you've got a choice. The choice is applying round one. Realistically, it's applying round one with a 321 to the Dardens, Ross, Cornell, Keenan Flaglers of the world, or push your application to round two, take the test again once, twice, get your score into the 328th, whatever, around that level. Really dedicate a couple of months to writing some really solid applications, and then an M7 application is credible, and maybe even a Wharton if you can really pull out all the stops and crush the narrative. Certainly worth applying, because you'll regret it if you didn't. And if you have a 328, you can justify that kind of application. That's where I'm seeing the two likely scenarios, John.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool.
I think the other T10s on this list, like Stern and Yale, those schools are very test score sensitive.
Yeah,
If
right.
you look at their averages, especially Yale, their GRE scores are through the roof. They're at upper M7 territory. So OP is right to not mention those. But if OP does crack a 328 or 330, those schools are also fair game.
Yeah. I just did a quick Google of it. I think, yeah, and it confirmed what I thought. 730 is their average. Now,
Yeah,
to be clear,
sure.
Yale is not M7, but 730 on the old test or equivalent is the M7 average. And why is that? Look, we know from experience that Stern gets a disproportionately high number of applicants because it's in New York. People like the idea of living in New York, and they're willing to sort of, it's M7 or Stern because it's New York is a classic kind of narrative line that we hear. So that's why, I would say Stern is out of reach as well with a 321. Yeah, cool. All right, John, next profile. Oh, I just closed it. Let me reopen it again from my other list. Just give me a second. Fat finger there, I think is what we used to call that in banking. Okay, so profile evaluation. Hi all, I'd love your feedback on my profile. Targeting programs focused on tech entrepreneurship and product management. Would appreciate insights on strengths, weaknesses, and realistic school suggestions. Okay, 30 years old, Indian software engineer, contractor at a UK-based startup. 7 years of experience doing full stack or back-end roles, industry, fintech, SaaS, payments, etc. BTech, computer science, BIT Mesra. GPA, 7.18 out of 10. GRE, 318. Work highlights. Help scale a startup across 3 geographies. Hands-on experience with payment integrations. Built infrastructure for real-time analytics and diagnostics. Extracurriculars, English teaching buddy for a Ukrainian war-affected student. Former HR head, volunteer, and at an NGO for about a year. Short-term goal PM, long-term goal entrepreneurship, as we've said. LORs are ex-boss and current/former manager. Would love feedback on what tier of programs to target, any glaring red flags, and should I retake the GRE for a marginal boost? John, profile evaluation. How do you see it?
I think I like this profile overall, Sam. I think I especially like OP's strong work experience. The academics, though, is going to be a significant problem, and we'll dive into that. That CGPA isn't great. And then now the salve here is that like BITS is a pretty good, well, Burla is a pretty good school. But schools do know what locations of BITS are better than others. And the one that he graduated from, Mesra, is not as reputable as the main big campus. So something to consider. Now I think that plus and subpar GRE is going to create problems for OP in his profile. But on a brighter note, I love OP's progression at work. The impact is important. Helping build infrastructure, helping startups scale. All those is meaningful, and I think that's going to be that's going to really help OP develop a meaningful narrative with their brand. But then again, those academics, Sam, that's making me nervous, especially for this person being an RM.
Shit show is the technical term. No, it's going to be difficult. I'm aligned. Okay, let's take it one piece at a time. So on the positive side for me, and it wasn't mentioned there in your evaluation, but I think it needs to be highlighted, is those LORs do look nice, right? Being able to get a recommendation from your current manager and your former manager, particularly the Cisco, India head, like that's a strong, that recommender carries credibility. If you can get some
Yeah.
really strong letters of recommendation from those two, that will be a big plus for the profile. So that's definitely a positive. Again, I like the work experience, as you say. I'm a bit concerned about how OP is going to frame that contractor role. And I think there's different ways of doing this, because obviously schools are going to, through the Revera system, are going to verify your employer status. So you can't, although I think I've heard of people doing it, but you can't just blank over the contractor status and put you down as an employee of that firm. But what you can do, which is interesting, and I've seen people do successfully, is position yourself as a sort of as an independent business. So you're a contractor, or are you a software engineering startup contracting this UK-based startup as your client? And you can almost position yourself with an entrepreneurial angle if you do that, and that can come across really positively. Bit of a bit of work involved in doing it, but it can really help. The other thing that stands out for me is on this professional experience, I'm seeing a bit of a financial inclusion narrative taking shape, John. So this piece around, what hands-on experience with payment integrations. See, the benefit of these payment integrations is you're helping startups access wider markets, or conversely, helping people in wider markets access useful resources. There's a bit of an inclusion story there, which could be, with a bit of massaging, work well. John, while we're on the positives, the other thing I love is this. English teaching buddy for Ukrainian war-affected students. I
love
worked with
that.
a client last year who used this as a core part of their narrative, and it worked wonders because the teaching style required for somebody who is in the middle of a war, you've got to be more empathetic, you've got to be more flexible, you've got to be more, all these leadership traits that schools look for, you can demonstrate them with that story. And I love that. So I think that is the other strength of this profile, which comes through really, really nicely. And then lastly, for me on the positives, is the goal, which, these goals are classic MBA, post MBA goals that we've seen work plenty of times before. OP has obviously done some research here and nailed down the right sequence of short-term PM or strategy, long-term entrepreneurship. Those are classic goals for software engineering applicants. So well done, OP there. Now, that's the good stuff. That's the positive. On the negatives, look, I think the big piece that stands out here is I think OP has been a little bit naive about the GRE. The question is, should I take the GRE for a marginal boost? OP, when you're scoring a 318 and targeting, it's presumably M7s, the GRE is not a marginal boost. It is absolutely critical. It really, really is. Let's say, John, that a worst case scenario that OP does not get that up and ends up with submits an application with a 318. Where do you think OP could be credibly considering?
I'm looking at a T20 or T25, Sam.
Okay. Given OP's focus on tech entrepreneurship, product management, any specific schools that jump to mind?
I think, well, on the higher end, if OP is aiming for T10 to T15, I think the tech MBA programs could be one target.
Interesting angle.
I've
Cornell
helped,
have one, right?
Yeah, Cornell, NYU Stern have helped someone from a client of ours, Sam, get in with a test waiver. So that could be one angle to get into these tech and MBA programs, and the policies do change from year to year. I believe this year they do take test waivers. So that's one hack to try to get into a higher ranked school outside of the T20 T25 bubble. But I'm thinking 10 Tepper might be an interesting one, just given the relationship with the larger Carnegie Mellon community. Yeah, I think that's those three come to mind.
I heard Babson has an entrepreneurial focus. It's probably
Babson does as well. That's correct.
probably lower down the rankings. I think CMU Tep is the one that jumped to mind for me as well with this score. And to be fair, like they've got a very strong network in tech, very strong credibility in that space. That would be a potential option. But I think OP, if I was in your shoes, I'd knuckle down. I'd take that test again. There's no mention of how many times OP's taken it, but if we assume it's the first time and OP suffers from all the usual first test issues that I mentioned in the earlier roast, then I think OP has a credible chance of getting that up into the 320s and maybe needs some tutoring for that. Get in touch with Super Mario, our colleague on the GMAT tutoring side. For that, OP, we can certainly help. But I think that's how the profile's shaping up to me. I think the without an improvement in score, we're looking at that sort of T20 level. And I think the way that you, with a higher score, and if you can frame that Ukrainian teaching story really positively, for example, between now and your MBA, you might be able to take up a leadership role within that organization. That could step that up. And if you frame your contracting work as entrepreneurship somehow, you do everything right, T10, T15 might be on the cards. That's how I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I'm aligned with that, Sam.
All right, excellent stuff. Right, next profile. So, actually not next profile. This is a very open-ended question, John, that OP is asking. Does nationality affect my chances? As the title reads, top MBA programs say they value diversity. Does that mean I'm indirectly competing with others from my own country during the admissions process? For example, if I'm from Zimbabwe and my application is strong and meets all the requirements, would the school be more inclined to admit me over an applicant from a country that has lots and lots of people to maintain class diversity? Just trying to understand how much nationality plays a role when the schools are trying to build a well-rounded class. John, as somebody who was involved in building the class at Berkeley Haas, what's your answer?
In general, diversity definitely, I mean, look, schools love to be able to boast how many different countries their students come from. And, typically the ones that get more recognition are the ones are places as far flung as New Zealand. Zimbabwe definitely factors into that as well. You will get a ton of applicants from certain geographies and nationalities. I can only count on a single hand people that I remember who are applying from OP's region. So definitely a factor.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, right? I did a little bit of to your point about schools bragging, so to speak, about how many nationalities they get. I did a quick Google. The one that jumps to mind is LBS. That's their map that they publish proudly on their website of, I think they said 65 different nationalities on the course. There we go. Let me move that across. 65 different nationalities in their class profile for MBA 26. So if you as a Zimbabwean applicant give them the chance to increase that number by one, then yes, of course that makes a difference. And of course it will be favorable for your application. I mean, Zimbabwe is underrepresented in every way, both from a sort of nationality perspective, but also from a continental perspective, etc. Like it really is just, and Zimbabwe would definitely help you. And then conversely, applicants applying from countries that are traditionally MBA, culturally heavy, so to speak, then they are at a disadvantage. And as John and I have talked about at length, if you are applying, for example, as an applicant from India, you typically need higher test scores to offset that because the group's more competitive. So the short answer is yes. There is also a slightly interesting narrative here, or sort of a nuance here, which is that it depends also on, you may be in Zimbabwe, but if you are, for example, an Indian applicant in Zimbabwe, that sort of tones it down a little bit, as opposed to somebody who is born and bred Zimbabwean. Then those will be treated differently. So there's a bit of a nuance there, but broadly speaking, the short answer is yes. Okay, awesome. John, I want to go back to roast, because I've just been flagged that there is another roast that we can add to our roast today, and I want to come back a step and talk about this profile, John, who's applying to foster, or is considering an application to foster. So the question here being asked is, can I get in with a test, given that they're test optional? Can I and should I do that? So let's talk about the profile. So I'm applying to foster in round 1 or round 2, and want to know what your chances are of applying without a GRE score. I took it a few months ago and got a 312. Currently studying for a retake, but want to know whether or not to apply if I don't get a better score. 31-year-old male, domestic candidate, Middle Eastern. Undergraduate school was DePaul, major business, double major in finance and accounting here. GPA 3.84, magna cum laude. Professional work experience, accounting and finance intern at a large hedge fund during undergrad, 4.5 years as a tax consultant at a Big Four, and 4 years at an HR tech startup, which is current role, managing global mobility and immigration operations. Okay. Highly topical, you could argue. Had a CPA license back when I was in the Big Four, but it is expired. Will that hurt my application, or or will it be positive? Post MBA goals, leaning towards tech, corporate finance, or maybe even an LDP. So very broad goals there, John. Any feedback? Greatly appreciated. John, overall, how do you see this profile before we talk about the school specifically?
I like the profile overall. I think there is it's a very meaty, operations heavy, execution focused brand that OP is presenting. Some may perceive that as boring. I think it can be refreshingly old school, and it can work really well for OP's brand. Diving into the academics, 384 is strong, magna helps. That CPA, even though it's expired, would paint you as someone who's technically equipped. Look, only a handful of schools take waivers, and we've kind of dipped into this a little bit, Sam. Stern, Darden, Anderson, Guizetta, in some extreme cases, Sloan does. It is worth a shot, but is it worth narrowing your list of schools just because you can't get the GR or GMAT score up for scores that would otherwise take an interest in your profile? Professionally, the mix of global HR tech, mobility, tax accounting, those are all very interesting. As I mentioned, the execution angle, technical angle is going to work really hard for OP. I kind of like this whole theme about being the backbone, powering companies from within. And we can sort of explore that narrative a little bit more, Sam. Middle Eastern, some would say in some cases URM. In general, test scores coming out of that region tend to be a little bit lower than the test scores from the neighboring regions like India. So schools may cut OP a little bit of slack. That's my suspicion, but I would think a little bit more about that test score and that test waiver. Over to you, Sam.
Hi. My view on this, I'm aligned with everything you've said. I think the big question mark, I'm used to kind of thinking most of our work is done in M7 world, right? Can I or can I not get into M7 is the kind of classic question we face. We're talking a different world here. We're talking foster. And I think the bar, clearly the bar is a little bit lower. Now, that said, I do think that if I was OP, and given that OP is really laser focused on one school, I think the following strategy is what OP should follow. I think a round 2 application with a higher score, take your time, play the long game, get that GRE score up, and apply in round 2 with an interesting profile. And then I think UW Foster is a strong likelihood to be a yes. Yeah, 320 would be nice. Mid 320s would be even nicer. But I definitely think that OP will be in a credible position for that application. And then to be constructive about that, there's a couple of things that I think OP can do, even just from this short profile evaluation that I can already see, to strengthen his profile and his or her profile. No, his profile, and make sure that the application doesn't go amiss. The first one is this. OP, your goals right now are very broad, right? You're talking about tech or corporate finance or an LDP. That's very, very wide. And I would strongly encourage you to narrow that down to a specific title, at a specific company, in a specific industry, in a specific geography. Schools aren't going to hold you to this, right? If you say, I want to join, I don't know, Amazon in, I don't know, wherever, XYZ city, on the Pathways program, that gives them enough understanding of your goals that they understand it might be something tangential to that. They get it. They're not going to hold you to that. But it paints a really clear picture, and it really solidifies you as an applicant, as opposed to saying tech or corporate finance or LDP. You look like a plastic bag blowing in the wind. Doesn't really know what you're doing, just affected by outside forces, and that's not what a leader looks like. So narrow that down, OP, even if it feels like you're being a bit more specific than you feel comfortable with. Narrow it down and it will do wonders for your application. That's one point of advice I have. John, the other point that I have, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, is this idea of HR tech. This is quite an interesting angle. We see people working, we get a lot of applicants working in tech. HR tech is one that I've not seen much of. And particularly when you start bringing into the sphere this idea of global mobility and immigration, it plays into this really big picture theme around international mobility and around,
I love that. Yeah,
opening up borders and just this big emotive theme that could be really, really valuable. So my advice on your narrative, OP, is really lean into that, because I tell you, it's a damn sight more interesting than tax consulting at Big Four, which is possibly the most boring thing you could write about. John, thoughts?
I like that, Sam. Look, the reality of how global this world is becoming would help HR tech come into the fore a little more. I think the analogy that I like to use is 10, 15 years ago, someone working in semiconductors, a hardware engineer, probably not as sexy. But nowadays, with the rise of NVIDIA, the importance of semis, I feel like this industry is just having a little bit more of a renaissance. I'm seeing the same thing with HR tech, especially if you can talk about how impactful it is, how it can ride the wave of how it can help support developing a more global workforce.
And it from a
That's gonna work
people
really
perspective.
well.
That's it,
Oh,
right?
for
From a
sure.
people
Yes.
perspective. It's also often difficult with tech to convey, it's code, it's whatever. It's difficult to sort of convey that impactfully. But when you're working in HR tech, you're really directly helping people to move from X to Y. Like that, and you tell that people story and lead your career goals essay with an impactful people story, and that will help you stand out dramatically.
Agreed.
That's how I'd be taking this. Excellent. Okay, John, last and very open-ended question for you here, which is one that's flagged up that I sort of caught my attention. I like this because it pulls on my heartstrings a bit. The question is, how do you go back to normal life after an MBA? So it's been an incredible year, well beyond my expectations. Had an incredibly stimulating environment, met friends, tick many boxes off my bucket list, and met an amazing girl who I'll hopefully share my life with. But now I've got to go back to normal life, and I'm quite scared about leaving this bubble and going back to my usual routine. For those who finished an MBA before, how was that transition for you? Any tips for finding your rhythm again? Very deep and soppy for us to end today's roast on, John. What's your thought?
OP, I feel for you. As someone, look, I think there's a kind of bond that you create with your classmates during an MBA program that you can't really get from from other settings. And in my unique case, it was spending the second year of my MBA program weathering the throes of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that, and forced us to get creative. It deepened bonds. It helped us plan creative trips. It helped us, work through logistics. All that, working through all of that, brought us together, as a great, as a friend group, as a team. Some things that helped me certainly was just making it a point to have quarterly trips. We had an annual ski trip that
You don't mind a holiday, do you, John?
what's that? Oh, yeah, of course. Who doesn't mind a holiday? Especially, when you go on these trips frequently during school, you try and replicate this, after school. Obviously, life happens, right? You have fewer vacation days. You may not be in the same city as your classmates. You don't travel quite as much as you can, but you're earning more. You have, you're, in some cases, you have more money to burn. I would try to take the positives of being in the workforce again and marry that with some of the other rituals that you've had with your friends, and you can't replicate it, one for one, but that can help, keep you in touch, enable you to keep in touch with your classmates. It can also help bring forward some semblance of an MBA community, no matter how
Yeah.
small
But
it is.
you need to step up. Is my point on that, is you need to step up and take charge of organizing those kinds of trips, reunions, etc. If nobody in the group steps up and does that, you'll be surprised at how quickly the social
That falls
fabric of your
apart.
MBA falls
Yeah.
apart. So,
Yeah.
OP, if this matters to you, you need to be the person that steps up and organizes that reunion and sets the date in 2 years' time. Right, everybody, 2 years, we're getting together in this place at this time. Put it in your diaries. Let's make it happen. You need to be the person that does that. There's always a few alums who step up and and help that kind of thing happen. Because trust me, without them, it will fall apart. So that's really, really important. I would also say, I mean, John, this post pulled on my heartstrings because I went through a really similar feeling. I can empathize with it. It was a really difficult transition for me. For a few, let's say, months, I felt really quite rudderless. And there were these weird, the MBA ended and we had this massive graduation ceremony and a huge party and everybody got legless. And we had this, and then everybody just like all the formality, all the formal avenues for getting together, the classroom, the clubs, all of a sudden, boom, weren't there. And all of a sudden, everybody had to make those meetings happen, make those encounters happen. And so there was a weird few months after our MBA where some people didn't have jobs yet. So they were still lingering around in their accommodation and they were feeling really rudderless all of a sudden. And I'm not, some people got genuinely depressed during that time. And it was tough. I moved abroad after my MBA. I moved from basically from Oxford to Amsterdam right after the MBA. And it was really, I went cold turkey, disconnecting from the MBA. And it was tough. It was tough. I would say that the main point is be the person that steps up and organizes stuff and try and keep those connections in place. Don't take them for granted. I think that's my sort of philosophical point to end on. Right. John, I love it. Take care. I'll see you soon.
Bye, Sam.
Anybody watching, you want your profile roasted? DM it to us. Get in touch. You want an admissions consultant? samweeks.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more roasts in the future. We'll see you soon.